Hello and welcome to this e-training module on the use of Spatial Modeler for a site selection scenario. So we're going to look at various GIS layers and use them to identify a location. If I go ahead and forward my slides, what we're going to look for, just as an example, is to locate the site for a military barracks. So the criteria we're going to look at is that it must be within 150 meters of a water source for fresh water. It must be built in a forested area for cover. It must be on gentle slopes, less than 1 degree for ease of construction. And we're also going to look at how to assign some attributes to our output site map. We're actually going to split this up into several e-training modules. So in this particular video, part 1, we're going to take a look at setting the initial model up to look at the water and the forested area selections. So let's go ahead and get started. And if you've been watching these Introduction to Spatial Modeler videos, you know that in the previous set of e-training modules we looked at taking a land cover classification, burning some roads into that land cover classification and generalizing the data to smooth out some of the salt and pixel effect in the land cover classification. So we're going to go ahead and use that as the model that we prepared earlier. This is the data that it produced with the roads and so on burnt in and different land cover classes. So we're going to use this as the basis for our site selection scenario. So one last time I'm going to show you how to start the Spatial Model Editor. File, New, Spatial Model Editor. One thing I could do is just drag and drop this dataset that I already have displayed into the Spatial Model Editor to create a raster input, but we'll do it the other way of dragging from the operators and onto the canvas. We've got a raster input, double click, and we could go ahead and navigate to where that data is located. And select it. And one thing we're going to do a little different from previous exercises is down here in the recode section we're going to change the radio button to recode the data, because we're only interested in a couple or a few of the land cover classes that are present. I'm going to set up the recode, stretch that table out so we can see it a little bit better. And we're interested in the forest classes and so on, and if we had a lot of land cover classes, it might be a little problematic to choose them individually. So what I'll just show you is how to do a criteria selection. So criteria, class names, contains forest, and click select and close, and we have made a selection of all the classes that are class forest. We're going to go ahead and change those to class 1, so the new value field is already set to 1. You can see the new value column here. We're going to say change selected rows, and that updates their new value to 1. Actually, I'm going to change that to 2 at the moment. I'll show you why in a second. Then we're going to invert the selection, so again in the value column right click and select invert selection. And we want to actually go ahead and unselect the water class from the inversion. So shift left click removes that from the selection, and those classes we're actually going to set to 0. So change that selection. Now you can see in the new value column that we have a class of 2 for the forests, class of 1 for the water, and a class of 0 for everything else. So go ahead and click OK, and then click OK in the raster input, and we've basically set up a raster stream coming out of the raster input that will have just those 3 classes: background, water, and forest. So next, to search away from the water class to 150 meters, we need to just determine what pixel size we're dealing with in the raster information. So I'm going to use the smart control in this instance because I've got the base land cover classification displayed, and click the image info or show metadata button. I could have brought that up from the home tab metadata button. It's preloaded the data, or I could have used the file chooser to select it. But the main thing that we want to look at is in the map info section that the pixel size is 15 meter pixels. So when processing raster data in the spatial modeler and doing a buffer or search operation to search away from a particular class to a distance of say 150 meters, because that's a raster operation, it operates in units of pixels. So if we've got 15 meter pixels and we want to search 150 meters, we're going to have to buffer around the water class by 10 pixels. 10 times 15 is 150 meters. So we can get rid of that. Now we can search for the buffer operation. As I say, we can search on buffer, and the actual function for raster data is the search function. So we're going to bring that in and drop it onto our canvas. Just connect the raster out port to the raster in just by simply dragging from one to the other. We can double click the port for the search distance. As I say, we want to type in a value of 10 pixels away from class number 1. So in the properties panel, we're going to click in the class port, enter a value of 1, which based on the recode we applied in the raster input operator, that is the water class. So we're going to search away from water a distance of 10 pixels. And the search function is going to give us basically an output with effectively 12 classes, 0 through 11. The class value 0 from the search will basically indicate that's no distance from the water class, i.e. water classes themselves will be the 0. Then you'll have dn values of 1 through 10 indicating the distance from that water class, and then 11 is everything beyond the specified distance. And obviously for our criteria of being within 150 meters of water class, we need to select everything that's less than or equal to the 10 value. So we're going to again search for a less than or equal to operator, drag and drop that onto our canvas, feed that in, and then in the input 2 we're going to enter the value of 10. So we're basically going to evaluate a condition of locations where the buffer is less than or equal to 10, which should give us those locations that are within 150 meters of water. We also want to find the class locations of forest. So we want an equals in that instance, and we basically want to bring in our raster input and say, okay, if the original raster input class is the recode value of 2, i.e. forest, those are the other locations that we are interested in. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room to work with here. We could zoom in or zoom out, but for the training I'm going to just get rid of the 2D view. What we want to do next, obviously, is evaluate locations where both criteria are true, that it is both a forestry area and it's within 150 meters of water. So that is a logical AND. We want both to be true. So I'm going to pull in the logical AND function operator, bring in both these tests. So both tests must be true. This must be true and this must be true. If both are true, then we get a binary 1 or a 0 if both, or otherwise it's false. So let's quickly test that. I'm going to bring in my preview operator, connect that up, and click preview. And we can now see those locations that meet our existing criteria. Go ahead and turn preview off. Close out that view. And what we should do at this point is go ahead and save our model. So File, Save As, Spatial Model As, and give it a name. Call it the barracks model. Click OK. And basically that's part one of our training course complete. We've set up a spatial model that basically is going to identify those locations that are both within 150 meters of a water source and under a forest canopy as potential sites for our construction work. In the next part of this training, part 2, we'll go ahead and add the slope search criteria. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you go ahead and watch the next e-training module in this series. Thank you.